Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another very exciting Civilizations in Review. My name is Ben. I'm one of the co-founders of Alphuzaic, and I'm very excited to jump into this fascinating ancient city empire today, the Carchemish Empire. With me is a fantabulous co-moderator, Andy Mond, content writer extraordinaire, and has been helping with the fellowship program. So excited to have your insights with us. And our wonderful content writer, Pilar, all the way from Spain, to chat about this fabulous slice of history. We'll start with the 101 word intro in just a moment that Andy will read, and then we will dive into the mysteries and excitement of this article. But just as a reminder, we are live streaming this to Facebook currently, and we'll cross-post this to our YouTube, our Instagram, our website, and our Spotify account so you can engage with it all. I will also say, though, that the best way to engage with it is directly on our website, alphuzaic.net, because you can read all of the details of the articles, see all the hyperlinks. This empire has many allies and rivals. You can read all the rest related to it and more. So welcome, excited to learn about this empire, and I'll throw it to Andy to read the 101 word intro.
Thank you, Ben. I was so excited to read about Carchemish because I feel like it's one of those empires that you actually hear about a lot. It pops up in lore and so many different people's histories. So the 101 word intro goes a little something like this. The city of Carchemish was situated in northern Syria, and it has been the point of encounter and conjunction of many important empires, such as the Hittites, Assyrians, and Mitanni. In the 18th century BCE, Carchemish was already recognized as an independent city, and it played an essential role in ancient Near Eastern history. Carchemish was of great interest among empires for being an important trade and military crossing, for its political importance, and for its remarkable architecture. The decisive Battle of Carchemish in 605 BCE is one of the most crucial occurrences that affected the city and the entire region. And so thank you, Pilar, for not only writing that amazing 101 word intro, but also all of the different facets that go along with the Civilizations 101 topic. So with that said, I wanted to ask you a little question. What was your favorite part about doing the research for Carchemish?
Well, I guess that what it was most interesting for me was the Battle of Carchemish itself, because there's a lot of happening in there. So you can see how the kings, the rivalries between the kings and the kingdoms, and how everything ends. And then you have suddenly someone appear out of nowhere and start fighting with another of it. So you have a mixture of a lot of different empires in the same moment, historical moment, doing random things, let's put it that way. So it has been very interesting to find out what really happened at that time, and what was that, why that was so important in the history of the Middle East. Yeah, as we know today, the Middle East.
That's so incredible. Yeah, the only thing I knew about this is the mega battle, which I think we'll get to in a bit. I want to build up to why this battle was so crucial. But yeah, just like Andy mentioned, this is one of the ones I knew of before. I knew it as the site of a battle, not really that the empire existed along with it. So yeah, thank you for making this part of our site now. This is so much better for everyone's knowledge.
Yeah.
No, please go for it.
I mean, it's very. It was the same for me. I just knew the history of the battle, but I didn't know how many, settlements, how many different settlements in the city you could find, and how the interactions and the dynamics, the social dynamics, the trade system they had. It's quite interesting, honestly.
Yeah, that I think is also one of the things that you wrote about in the modern influence, is the fact that the trade and the infrastructure they had in their city was discovered by archaeologists, and that was used to really infer a lot about history. And I think one of the conversations that's been happening recently is, where do archaeological artifacts belong? Do they belong with the folks who found and took them outside of their countries, or do they belong in their home country? And I think, we haven't really spoken about the Middle East or Near East, as technically Syria is, and what their cultural artifacts and their cultural influence in this sphere has done. And so I loved seeing that in the modern influences section, even without that second part. But when I looked at like the hydraulic, because words are hard, hydraulic revolution, I was like, wait, I've only ever heard about Rome's water system. What's happening in Carchemish?
Yeah, it's true. There's not like a lot of information about that, about Carchemish being super involved in that, but it makes sense. And I wanted, people to read about it because it makes sense. Carchemish was a city located just next to the Euphrates. So that at the end of the day, it makes sense that Carchemish was one of the main cities transporting and facilitating this kind of infrastructure, like, for improving at the end of the day, the quality of life of the neighborhoods, of the neighboring cities. So yeah, I don't know. I thought it was like something curious that nobody knew. I didn't know. So I thought it was something, remarkable to say about Carchemish.
I agree. I love when we are able to see history from various perspectives. We much more often than not, history starts and ends with Rome. It takes a break, and then all of a sudden it picks up with the British Empire. And so to like read about the hydraulic revolution, look, she said it in one go that time. I was like, oh, this is so cool. So that I agree with you. And then one of the other things that really kind of struck out to me was, just to your point, the amount of interest in this region and the amount of well-known players who were there, like the Hittites and the Assyrians and the everybody. So in doing your research for Carchemish, did you have any kind of connection to their rivals and their allies, or was that your first time delving into them as well?
Yeah, well, the first thing I noticed was that Carchemish was a city that influenced the area for such a long period of time that you just cannot, there's a lot of information, you cannot just retain all that information. So for me, it was easier to just do what you said, like, okay, this empire was here for this period, then this other empire came and, destroyed the other one. And so, like, at the beginning, you have three main empires, who are the Mitanni, the Hittites, and the Egyptians, who were the three main ones. Yes, from this, I think it was the 7th century to the 13th century. Basically, the Mitannis were trying to, they were supporting Carchemish. Let's put it that way. Carchemish wanted to stop the Hittites to go inside the city, so they create this kind of alliance with the Mitanni. But eventually, the Hittite Empire was a powerful empire, so they conquered the city. And surprisingly and not surprisingly, when the Hittite Empire was destroyed because the Egyptians entered into the city was like kind of neo-Hittite cultural place. They invaded the city, they didn't want them in, but once they disappear of the place, the cultural heritage remains there. And the Carchemish people was like really invested in keeping that historical heritage. And I think most of the kings that were in Carchemish by the time the city was ruled by itself were Hittite king or descendant of Hittite kings. So, I don't know, it's curious how, dynamics works at the end of the day. And one of the other most interesting empires, I can say, were the Assyrians for sure. You can tell they were like super violent and like, I'm gonna take what is mine and I don't care. And now you're gonna pay me more because I say so. So I don't know, the dynamics that they, create were very interesting.
Yeah,
it really is. It's so fascinating just to sort of hear Carchemish's like really central role in these mega empires at the time. And again, I know we're leading up to this battle, but I still don't want to get there yet, because I think there's so many parts to just the city of Carchemish and its trade and hydraulic system and everything else that is really unique, really, for the region and for the time period. I mean, they probably built off of their trade with Rome, learning those systems and seemingly elevated it for their own. I don't know, that's my assumption just reading your article, but if you know more, please jump in. But I'm just so interested, really, as you have mentioned all of this, in the trading component, in how they, even the main picture of Carchemish, excuse me, are these like deities that were being traded, this metalwork, gold, vessels, just all of these fabulous things, that they really seem to be a center of this trade route of, ancient northern Syria, Turkey, Anatolia. Tell me more about the trade that you saw in all your research.
Yeah, well, basically they trade with literally everything, like everything. Because they have like I think it was the Anatolia's mine, like metal deposit, sorry, very close. And in fact, the Hittite Empire had its capital in Anatolia. So it makes sense that they have an easy access to that deposit. So they were like, they were very good with gold. Like they were exporting luxury goods to the Assyrians, for example. So with metals, they had also like very fertile lands. So they were constantly, they had like these big markets where all the passengers, because at the end of the day, Carchemish was a cross highway for the west to the east and the other way around. So literally all the food, the metals, the basals, bronze, they just create they got economic reward for literally everything. So
yeah. Which is funny that you mentioned that like the Assyrians were one of their biggest customers, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like they bit the hand that fed them, because the Assyrians, according to your economics section in Carchemish 101, is like they tried to raise how much Carchemish was paying them.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, why would I do that? If I'm getting pretty things from you, I want to continue to get the goods. So do you have any like assumptions or ideas about what could have led to that? Maybe it was a failed relationship or something.
Yeah, apparently Carchemish was one of the richest city in the region. So you could tell because of the metals that they have and how wealthier at the end of the day. They were wealthier than the rest of the cities. So I think it was Sargon II. I think it was Sargon II. I might be wrong. The Assyrian king just decided that because they were wealthier, they have to contribute with a bigger, tax. And obviously Theseus, who was at that time the king of Carchemish, didn't agree with that. And that was one of the big mistakes, because after he complained about that, Sargon just accused him of being, breaking oaths and conspiring with another kings against him. And that's when the Assyrians said, okay, that's the end. Now we're going to in and we're going to, attack you with everything we have. And that's when this city was not completely destroyed, but Carchemish will never recover from what the Assyrians did from that point. So
yeah, that's so unfortunate, because also history is just full of so much drama. I love it.
It has.
But it's funny to me that, I'm wondering how long did the Assyrians kind of have an influence in Carchemish, that it was the Hittite Empire that really influenced the culture, and that was the culture that they retained even as they moved forward. So what was like the comparison in terms of time for how long those influences were available, I guess, or rather present in Carchemish?
And the Hittites were in Carchemish, I think it was during until the 14th century. And the Assyrians didn't arrive until the 11th century, I guess it was. But the influence they had was really different. While the Hittites were, at least what I read about it, the Hittites were more like trying to integrate all the already existing cultures with their own culture. The Assyrians were not that nice. And they literally said like, okay, so now we won. Now we're going to put an Assyrian governor in the city. There's not going to be more, local dynasties ruling Carchemish. And to top it off, we are going to take Carchemish population and we're going to expel them, expel out of the city. And we're going to repopulate the city with Assyrian citizens. So yeah, both empires had like a very important influence at the end of the day, culturally speaking. I mean, literally the Assyrians were the end of Carchemish. Let's put it that way. But in a very different way. Yeah, Assyrians were not like nice with the Carchemish people. No.
Does not seem like it.
No, they weren't.
That's how they treated a whole bunch of other empires too, so that kind of tracks.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Tracks.
Yeah, that's probably why we know them super well as well, because they put their hands everywhere. Oh,
They were some savages.
Yeah, wild. It's so fascinating though, the like contrast to being such a rich center for trade, resources, architecture, history, probably also led to their downfall in some ways. And we've been teasing our audience enough. I think it's time to talk about the battle. So we're kind of leading up to it anyways, with all these key players and ancient empires and desire for this land and resources. Tell us everything that you can about the Battle of Carchemish.
Okay, I'm going to try to summarize it.
Go for it.
I mean, the Battle of Carchemish was basically an event which made the Egyptians face the Egyptians against the Babylonians in an epic confrontation. First of all, the Babylonians were already taking like a lot of the surrounding territories, not the Assyrian territory or the Egyptian territories, but the surrounding territories. So the Assyrians felt the threat of the Babylonians coming for them too. The Babylonians took, I'm just thinking right now, it was not a feeling, it was an actual, fact. The Babylonians took the capital of the Assyrians. So the Assyrians I don't know how to pronounce the name, Nineveh, I think it's spelled. And so they have to move then the capital to Haran. But the Babylonians took Haran again. So they have to move the capital again to Carchemish. So they were seeing like, okay, these people are coming. We are not enough. They outnumber us. So we have to do something. So they asked for help to the Egyptians. And the Egyptians were also fearing the Babylonians advance. So they say, okay, we're going to, make an alliance and we're going to try to support each other. So Necho II, who was the one leading the battle from the Egyptian side, decided to look for the Babylonians, to do the first move and attack. But he didn't expect that the king of Judah was a Babylonian ally, and he ambushed them out of nowhere. The king of Judah lost, but he was able to take some, like human resources from the Egyptian side. So experts, at least what I read, says that it might be a crucial point for what it has been the output of the final battle, because the Egyptians were also weaker because of the incident. So when the Egyptians arrived to the battle next to Carchemish, because it was next to Carchemish, they were already like weak, and the Babylonians took advantage of that. And not only that, but the Babylonians were ruled by the Egyptian prior to that battle. So they had the advantage that they knew how the Egyptian tactics, militarily speaking, worked. So they had that advantage too. And of course, the Assyrians were already like not very strong at that point, because the Babylonians took 3 of their main cities. So it was just something that had to happen. If you see the facts, like it was something unavoidable.
Yeah, it's funny to be like in history as it's happening, because one of the things you said was like, as they were right to fear that the Babylonians were going to come in and take over everything. And we know with the, publishing of many, many works, including Carchemish 101, that their fear was indeed founded, and that Babylonia did come in and just kind of take over everything and do that. But they tried to fight it. They did.
They did. No, they tried their best, but sometimes you lose.
Yeah, that's what happens. And I think the most important thing, historically speaking, in my opinion, the most important thing is to not lose the culture behind it. because that's how in 2022 Pilar was able to figure out all this information about Carchemish, because the culture was left behind and people are still interested in the culture, even though they clearly lost that battle.
Yeah, there's a great question of how many other previous empires we don't know about because those pieces were not preserved. And we can't get into that because we fully don't know, but thank goodness Carchemish was, because what a fascinating sort of insight to, they were correct on all, they knew that the threat was coming, it came, they lost, like, but the fact that we know those pieces is so fascinating, because it's not the case for others. So to all of our anthropologists and cultural historians listening in to tonight's call, if you know or have heard of other empires that are not on our site because maybe their cultural pieces were wiped, let us know. We can maybe add to our civilization section, continue growing that library. It's so interesting. But yeah, no, I know that this battle is really the way I have first learned about this city empire, but I didn't really learn about it as the empire of Carchemish, just a city in this region, but then was the location of a mega battle. So this has been so enlightening to hear all of the other components that actually made that battle kind of more devastating in some ways. So I'm not happy about it, but I appreciate the knowledge, so thank you for that.
Yeah. Which is funny because in Key Accomplishments, you write about how the topography of the city allowed it to be like a strategic military location.
Yeah.
And like even that didn't help.
No, at some point, I mean, you need more than the geographic location to be fair.
Location isn't everything.
Yeah, location isn't everything.
What are hills?
Well, it's also probably why they were targeted. On top of their trade, geography, location, their topography probably helps too. Wow.
Yeah.
One of the things I think is interesting is the battle is basically the end of the empire, right? 605 BCE.
Yeah.
But obviously its relevance and engagement is still talked about 2,000 years later. I'm curious if there's any sort of in your research of right after the battle, as the empire sort of started to take over Carchemish, if there was sort of any like preservation. I mean, obviously there is, we have their artifacts today, but if you like read about any of the like preservation cultural heritage process, just out of curiosity really, if you even looked into that.
I mean, as long as I know, the city kept existing, but it was not, definitely was not as influential as it is, was during that time. And so, but that's the thing. I mean, after the battle, you just have little pieces of information, like saying this, like, the decline of the city started at this point. They host some other different empires, but not with the same level of importance. And that's it. Like, and I think now Carchemish is a military base, not base, but like a military thing in Turkey, because now the city is in the border with Syria. So yeah, if you like, I don't know, I was thinking when I first saw that now it's like a military thing for Turkey, I thought like, I don't know, how things change. Literally this piece of land was so important for so many empires and for literally the entire history of a region. And now it's just, I think there's a building or 2 or 3 buildings in the middle of nowhere. Being used for military purpose. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just history, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent.
Wow.
But it's kind of ironic that they were like, oh yes, we'll put our military base in a city who is known for its greatest military defeat.
Yeah. So we're not going to dissect that decision at all. That's just a thing that you all now know, listeners. Well, we're sort of nearing the end here of this fascinating insight. We could keep talking for hours, but don't want to have too long of a call. So, Pilar, tell us, any final pieces, really cool info you learned, or a fun fact, or anything else you'd like to share with us as we wrap up this conversation.
Well, I recently read that I didn't know. By the time I was doing the research, I didn't know that apparently the architecture of the city and the buildings and the constructions were a way from the kings of the city to express their political, like
Yeah.
power, or to say, yeah, we are here and you people are here. So you can see that there were this part of the city whose walls were built higher because they wanted to differentiate this part from this one, and they started to do, or they use like different rituals to show their power on how the political environment is going to change. Now we are going to do some processions, or today we're going to do some offering to the gods, and sort of, yeah, they use like, they integrate everything at the social life, buildings and political. And yeah, and I didn't know that, and I thought it was interesting.
That's funny. I feel like that's almost every empire in that region, in that time period, because like Rome did the same thing. That's why they had so many like triumphal columns. Even the Arc de Triomphe in Paris was a testament to, I'm going to show you how great and powerful I am.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's cool though, because you also have to
Yeah.
wonder, how did y'all build that?
Yeah, and they also put like different decorations in the gates and in the walls, because they wanted to highlight, this is the rich part and this is not the rich part, and we have to we want you to be aware that not only inside the city but also with the neighbor cities, like, we have this potential, we are this rich, and we are using what we have, like gold and metals, to make an important city and a strong city. So yeah.
Fascinating. Like ruling by architecture is a phrase I've like, obviously it makes sense, but I've never really heard it organized that way. And that's fascinating too. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that extra little bit of info. Look at that. Well, thank you again, Pilar and Andy, for being here today. What a fabulous insight to this pretty well-known battle, and then the empire that led up to it, or that ended it, at least. So thank you for sharing your research and knowledge, Andy, for your fabulous insights, as always. And to you, our listener, for engaging with this really cool, interesting slice of history. There are still many more pieces we did not even get to in this call. And so please jump to our website, alfusaic.net, alfusaic.net, and explore more about the Carchemish history, hyperlinks, research. Get your BCE, Northern Syria, Anatolia knowledge on, because it's a fascinating article and great stuff are connected there. So thank you again all for tuning in. We'll wrap up here. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thanks again, Pilar, for writing this fabulous, fabulous article.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to you guys.
Thanks, Pilar. Bye.
Bye.